So recently I've had a great time chasing contacts through Sporadic-E on bands such as 10 meters. Now usually when we think of propagation on HF, we think of signals refracting, that's bending off the F layer, which is quite high up in the atmosphere. Now with Sporadic-E, we have signals bouncing off smaller clouds of what would be unusually ionized gas in the lower E region of the ionosphere, around 100 to 160 kilometers up. And quite often this ionization is often up to about 5 times that expected at the peak of the sunspot cycle. Now in the Northern Hemisphere we tend to have our peak Sporadic-E season around sort of May, June time. So we're currently right in the middle of it now, it's right at the start of June. In the Southern Hemisphere you tend to have a different set of months of course. November through February tends to be their sort of time. But even here in the Northern Hemisphere you do get some winter Sporadic-E as well. We had a nice opening or two around sort of the early to the middle part of January for example this year. And I think last year from memory between Christmas and New Year there were some very good openings on 10 meters as well. So I've been going down to the beach using the old hamstick, the Ampro 10, when I've been running mobile, and also the T2LT here at home, the home-built, homebrew 10 meter half wave vertical, and I've had some really good contacts. You quite often find with Sporadic-E as well that the openings tend to be quite narrow sometimes in their focus geographically. So for example, one evening a couple of weeks ago down by the beach I was hearing a lot of Scandinavia.
Echo, George, QTH on the Swedish west coast near Gothenburg.
10 kilo Echo November, and QTH alltså Oslo, capital city.
5 and 7 here. I'm sitting here in west coast of South Sweden. Over.
Now one symptom of Sporadic-E, if you're not by a radio for example, in the old days would be when we had analog television, and quite often we had a lift on, and quite often you saw maybe pictures from across the channel here in the UK, in Northern Europe come through and sort of affect your TV signals. And it was more noticeable though, of course, in those days because you got ghosting, you got co-channel interference, you might have more than 2 transmitters who operate usually quite happily, independently of each other in normal conditions on the same channel, suddenly interfere with each other. And it was very noticeable of course in the old analog days. Of course in the digital times now, then often it would just lead to pictures being lost, but sometimes you then find the encoder on your set-top box or your television suddenly tell you it's a different transmitter that they can actually read. So sometimes that can be fun as well, spotting that on digital TV, terrestrial television that is, as well as on on the old days using analog. VHF broadcast radio is another good one as well. So between 88 and 108 megahertz VHF FM, you tend to find that you're able to sometimes hear stations from the continent coming through here in the UK, and that again is another indication that there's a Sporadic-E opening occurring. And it's a good time then if you've got a radio nearby to switch on to 6 meters, which has also been really busy lately, and 10 meters, maybe even 4 as well, maybe sometimes 2 meters, but 6 and 10 tend to be the go-to bands when it comes to the majority anyway of these Sporadic-E openings. And click here to find out how to make that homebrew antenna for a 10 meter half wave that's really effective for Sporadic-E and other contacts.